The storm that raged across the surface of Vardo's III was not born of weather. It was a storm of dust and magnetics, birthed by the endless grinding of the desert wind against the iron-rich plains. For 100 kilometers in every direction, the landscape shimmered with static discharge, and the air itself tasted faintly of metal. Far beneath that storm, buried within the safety of an ancient geothermal cavern, humanity's last frontier station clung to life. The outpost, named Bastion's Reach by those who built it, had stood for 23 years. It was meant to be a way station for deeper exploration into the Perseid fringe, an edge of the known galaxy claimed by no empire, populated by no species willing to call it home. But Bastion's Reach had become more than that. It was a fortress, a refuge, and to those who remained, a prison. Kael Moran walked the perimeter of the outer engineering deck, his boots clanging against the old alloy grating. His hand rested on the railing as he peered down at the vast turbine chamber below. The geothermal siphons pulsed rhythmically, each one drawing power from the veins of the planet itself. The air was hot, dense, and filled with the constant hiss of steam. He adjusted his rebreather mask and muttered, "Still bleeding pressure from valve 32. "Already patched it twice," came a voice from above. Lirae Tan, one of the senior engineers, leaned over the upper catwalk. Her short dark hair was matted with grease, and her pale eyes reflected the faint red glow of the turbines. "You keep chasing it like it's a ghost." That line cracked all the way through. Kael frowned. "Then we should replace it." "With what?" Lirae snapped. "You think we've got spare conduits for geothermal mains lying around? That shipment was due 8 cycles ago." The merchants stopped coming when the skies started burning. Kael sighed and nodded. The merchants, independent traders who once risked the fringe routes for profit, had stopped visiting after rumors spread of ships vanishing near the outer nebulae. Some said the storms took them. Others whispered of unseen hunters in the void. He didn't believe in ghosts or curses. But he had seen the wrecks himself, hulks of human ships, shredded and drifting near the asteroid belts. No signs of life, no logs recovered. "All right," Kael said. "We'll reinforce the pressure housing with composite bands. It'll hold another few months." Lirae smirked. "You always say that, and I'm usually right." A low tremor rolled through the deck. Both of them froze. The turbines shuddered, and for a moment the lights dimmed to a sickly amber. Kael swore under his breath and rushed to the control panel. He scanned the readings, temperature spikes, power fluctuations, magnetic feedback, then slammed his hand against the stabilizer. The vibration subsided. The lights steadied. "Another one," Lirae whispered. "That's the third in as many days." Kael didn't answer immediately. He stared at the readout, brow furrowed. The tremors weren't random. The planet's geothermal output had been fluctuating wildly for weeks. Some of the older technicians thought the core was destabilizing, but Kael suspected something else, something moving beneath the crust. He turned off the console and faced Lirae. "I'm going to report to command." "Good luck getting them to listen." He gave her a grim smile and left. Command was housed in the central dome, a massive chamber carved from the planet's natural basalt and reinforced with layered alloy plating. The walls hummed faintly with electromagnetic shielding, protection against the unpredictable bursts from the storms above. As Kael entered, he saw a cluster of officers gathered around the main hollow table. The air smelled faintly of ozone and tension. Commander Rin Sorek stood at the head of the table, his sharp features illuminated by the shifting blue of the holographic display. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with skin weathered from years on the frontier. His eyes were pale gray, like the light of distant moons. "You're late, Moran," Sorek said without looking up. Kael stopped beside him. "Was dealing with another power tremor, sir." "Of course you were." Sorek gestured to the hologram. It displayed a topographical map of the surrounding region, deep subterranean tunnels extending outward from Bastion's Reach. "We've got new readings. Something's burrowing beneath us." Kael's stomach tightened. How deep? Too deep for sensors to get a clean image. But it's moving slowly, methodically. Whatever it is, it's big. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. Could be tectonic activity, one suggested. Could be, Sorek said dryly, if tectonic activity chose to move in a straight line and stop every 6 hours. Kael leaned closer. The movement pattern was deliberate. Circular paths, intersecting lines like mapping behavior. How long have you been tracking it? 3 weeks. 3 weeks and we're only discussing it now. Kael's tone was sharper than he intended. Sorek turned to him with a glare. You think I enjoy keeping secrets? The council insisted it was classified until we confirmed it wasn't just seismic interference. Now we have confirmation. Then what do you think it is? Kael asked. Sorek's expression hardened. I think we've got company. The room fell silent. There were no known intelligent species native to Vardo's III. The world was barren, hostile, unfit for habitation without heavy engineering. The colonists who built Bastion's Reach had surveyed the planet thoroughly. But the deeper they dug, the more anomalies they found, metallic veins that weren't mineral, energy readings that didn't match any natural signature. Send a probe, Kael said finally. A tunneler drone. If we can track its path, maybe we'll find what it's after. Sorek nodded slowly. Already ahead of you. Probe team leaves at dawn. The next morning, Kael joined the survey team as they prepared the drone in the southern hangar. The tunneler was a squat machine, heavily armored, equipped with drilling limbs and seismic sensors. Route is mapped, Lirae said, double-checking the console. We follow the anomalies trail down to 3 kilometers depth. Keep comms open, Kael replied. If the magnetic field spikes, pull it back immediately. The drone powered up, its lights blinking to life. It rumbled across the hangar floor, entered the drill shaft, and began its descent. For the next few hours, Kael monitored the data feed, pressure readings, resonance patterns, thermal signatures. Everything looked normal at first. Then at 2,000 meters, the drone's sensors picked up a faint pulse. Energy reading? Kael asked. Lirae frowned. Negative, not electrical, it's rhythmic. The pulse grew stronger. The drill cams showed a tunnel smooth, perfectly circular, its walls coated with a dark reflective substance. That's not natural, Kael whispered. Signal interference increasing, Lirae said. We are losing visual. Pull it back. Before she could respond, the feed flared white. Static roared across the speakers. Then silence. Drone-S gone, she said softly. Kael stared at the blank screen. Recover what data you can. Hours later, they analyzed the fragments. The final image was brief, less than a second, but it showed something unmistakable. A structure embedded within the tunnel wall, metal and stone fused together, glowing faintly with blue light. A design too precise to be natural. Sorek reviewed the footage in command. That settles it, he said grimly. There's something down there. What are your orders? Kael asked. We go in. Kael blinked. You want to send a team into that? Bastion's Reach is running out of time, Sorek said. If the geothermal core collapses, this entire station dies. If that thing down there is affecting it, we need to know how and we need to stop it. Kael hesitated, then nodded. Then I'll lead the team. Sorek's gaze lingered on him. You always volunteer for the dangerous assignments. Someone has to. They descended at dawn. The expedition team, Kael, Lirae, 2 soldiers named Vayak and Juno, and a geologist called Tema, entered the shaft using a reinforced crawler. The descent was rough, the tunnel walls trembling under the weight of the storming surface far above. At 2,000 meters, they reached the tunnel where the drone had vanished. The crawler's floodlights swept across the smooth walls, revealing strange markings, patterns like veins or circuitry, pulsing faintly with blue light. Get readings, Kael said. Tema pressed a scanner against the surface. Compositions mixed, metallic alloys fused with crystalline structures. Nothing in our database matches it. Artificial construction confirmed, Kael murmured. They followed the tunnel for another kilometer before reaching a vast chamber. It was spherical, carved with the same precision, and at its center stood an enormous monolith. The structure pulsed with energy resonating deep within the air. Lirae stared in awe. This isn't human. No, Kael said quietly, but someone wanted it buried. As they approached, the monolith stirred. The blue light brightened, shifting through colors like a living current. "Energy spike," Tema shouted. Kael raised his weapon. "Everyone back," the ground erupted. A shockwave hurled them to the floor, the air filled with blinding light and the sound of shattering stone. When the glare faded, Kael looked up and saw it. A shape emerged from the monolith, tall and skeletal, formed of metal and light. Its movements were fluid yet deliberate. Its face was featureless, save for 2 points of burning azure. The soldiers opened fire. Bolts of energy struck the figure but dissipated harmlessly against a shimmering field. It raised one arm and unleashed a wave of force that sent them sprawling. Kael tried to crawl toward Lirae, who lay dazed against a rock. The creature turned its gaze toward him. For a moment, Kael felt its presence inside his mind, cold, calculating, ancient. Then it spoke, not in words, but in thought. "Why do you awaken what should remain buried?" Kael gasped, clutching his head. "Who are you?" "We are the architects of your path, the forge before your birth, the silence after your end." "Stop," he choked out. "Leave this world. The balance must not be disturbed." And then, just as suddenly, the presence was gone. The creature stepped back into the monolith, and the light dimmed. Kael collapsed to his knees, shaking. Lirae stirred. "Kael, what happened?" He looked at the now dormant monolith, its surface dark once more. "We just found something older than humanity." Back in Bastion's reach, the findings spread quickly through the ranks. Some saw it as proof of an ancient alien civilization. Others believed it was a weapon, a relic from a forgotten war. But Kael couldn't shake the voice from his mind. Its warning echoed in every thought. Leave this world. Only, leaving was no longer an option. The tremors grew stronger each day. The geothermal systems were nearing collapse. And somewhere beneath them, the monolith's light flickered, pulsing like the heartbeat of something waking up. Kael stood on the observation deck, watching the storm rage across the horizon. The planet was coming alive, and humanity had just given it reason to remember its creators. 3 days after the encounter beneath the surface, Bastion's reach began to change. The first sign was the power grid. Energy surges rippled through the geothermal conduits without any identifiable source. Monitors flickered, lights dimmed, and the turbines groaned as though the world itself was straining against their hold. Kael hadn't slept in 36 hours. He stood in the engineering control hub, surrounded by walls of data screens, their constant hum filling the air like a swarm of insects. Lirae was hunched over the diagnostic console, eyes sunken from fatigue. "The pressure differentials are climbing again," she said. "We're looking at another rupture within the hour." Kael scanned the readings. "We've rerouted twice already. If this keeps up, we'll lose the entire grid. And with it, life support, comms, and shield containment," Lirae added. "In that order." He nodded grimly. "Then we need to shut down the lower siphons. Give the planet time to stabilize." "That's not what Command wants." Kael turned sharply. "What?" She gestured toward the upper deck. "Sorek sent word. They're expanding operations instead, deploying a second tunneler team to recover tech fragments from the monolith chamber." Kael's stomach sank. "They're sending people back down there. They think whatever's buried under us could be the key to controlling the geothermal systems. The Council believes it's a power source." Kael slammed his fist against the railing. "It's not a power source, it's a warning." Lirae looked away. "Try telling them that." He didn't need to. He intended to show them. Commander Sorek was in the council hall, a narrow chamber carved directly into the basalt spine of the station. 6 high-backed chairs surrounded a circular table, their occupants cloaked in the muted gray of administrative authority. Kael entered without invitation. "Commander," he said, voice low but steady, "we need to stop the excavation." Sorek looked up, his expression unreadable. "You're out of line, Moran. I've seen what's down there," Kael pressed. "It's not human, it's active. We triggered something." Councillor Mayan, a thin woman with silver-streaked hair, folded her hands, and yet the energy readings suggest it could stabilize our power grid indefinitely if properly harnessed. "Harnessed?" Kael repeated incredulously. "You want to harness something that spoke to us? It wasn't a machine, it was sentient. Another counselor, old and pale, said, "You're an engineer, not a theologian. Leave interpretation to those qualified." Kael clenched his jaw. "Interpret this. The geothermal core is fluctuating in rhythm with that monolith. You're linking our life support to something we don't understand." Sorek's eyes narrowed. "Enough." Kael met his gaze. "If you keep digging, we're not going to find salvation. We're going to wake up whatever built this world, and it won't be merciful." The silence that followed was long and heavy. Finally, Sorek said, "Return to your post, Moran. That's an order." Kael didn't move. "If you won't stop it, I will." Sorek's tone turned cold. "Are you threatening insubordination?" Kael's voice was quiet, but it carried. "I'm threatening extinction if you keep playing God." He turned and walked out before anyone could answer. By the time he reached engineering, the alarms were already sounding. Lirae was waiting by the control board, eyes wide. "They activated the tunneler," she said. "It's already 2 kilometers down." "Cut their comm feed through the central relay," Kael ordered. She hesitated. Do it." With a few rapid keystrokes, she severed the uplink. The channel went dead. Kael pulled up the live feed from the auxiliary sensors. The tunneler was moving through the old shaft, following the same path as their first expedition. The readings spiked: heat, radiation, magnetic flux. "Bring up visual." The display shimmered to life, revealing the tunnel's interior. The walls glowed faintly blue, brighter than before. The further the tunneler advanced, the more the light pulsed, slow, deliberate, alive. "Those aren't reflections," Lirae whispered. "No," Kael said. "They're responses." Suddenly, the video blurred. Static rippled across the screen. Then, for the briefest moment, an image appeared, something vast moving just beyond the light, like the shadow of a giant stirring in sleep. Then the signal cut out completely. "Connection lost," Lirae said. "Same as last time." Kael exhaled slowly. "It's aware of us now." That night, Bastion's reach trembled. The quake rolled through the lower decks like thunder underwater. Support struts groaned, bulkheads warped, and a dozen lights shattered in bursts of sparks. Kael and Lirae raced through the corridors, guiding teams toward emergency stations. "Seal Section C," Kael shouted over the noise. "Get everyone out of the mining galleries." The lights flickered again, then died entirely. Darkness swallowed the hall. A moment later, a soft blue glow began to seep through the cracks in the walls. Lirae froze. "Tell me that's not..." Kael shook his head. "It's coming up." The glow pulsed faster, like a heartbeat climbing toward panic. The metal beneath their boots vibrated, resonating with the same alien rhythm. Then came the sound, a deep, resonant hum that reverberated through bone and air alike. It wasn't noise in the human sense, but vibration, language in pure frequency. The walls around them shifted. The alloy seemed to ripple, momentarily fluid. Lirae stumbled back. "The station's changing." "Not the station," Kael said softly. "The planet." They reached the elevator shaft that led to the upper dome. When they emerged into the command tier, chaos reigned. Officers shouted into dead comm lines, screens flickered with static, and the main holo display was filled with unintelligible symbols, geometric patterns in blue and gold that moved like living code. Sorek stood before it, pale but unflinching. "It's broadcasting," he said. Kael joined him. "From the monolith?" Sorek nodded. "Across every frequency we can read. It's not random, it's language." "Can you translate?" "We are trying. The symbols keep rewriting themselves." Kael stared at the patterns. For a brief moment, he recognized something, a spiral intersected by a triangle. He had seen it before, carved into the walls of the tunnel. "Stop decoding it," Kael said suddenly. "Now," Sorek frowned. "Why? It's not talking to us, it's talking through us." But it was too late. The holo display flashed white, and a surge of energy swept through the dome. Consoles exploded, sparks flying like swarming fireflies. Officers screamed as static flooded the air, and for a moment, every voice in the station seemed to speak in unison, not human voices, but something vast and ancient echoing through their throats. "The iron path awakens. The forge remembers its makers." The balance must be restored. Then silence. The light died. Kael staggered backward, gasping. Around him, the officers collapsed to the floor, unconscious but alive. Sarek stood rigid, gripping the table. What was that? Kael's voice was hoarse. A message. From what? Kael met his eyes. From whoever built this place, and they're not finished. Over the next several days, the situation deteriorated. Communication with orbit was lost entirely. The storm above the surface intensified, static discharges climbing higher than the atmosphere itself. Supply stores dwindled, and the geothermal systems continued to destabilize. But something stranger began to happen in the lower decks. Workers reported walls shifting when unobserved, corridors rearranging, metal panels fusing into unfamiliar shapes. Sensors placed in those regions returned data that defied physics: inverted gravity, negative mass readings, quantum distortion. And always, that faint blue glow, pulsing like a heartbeat from the deep. Kael spent his nights in engineering, tracking the rhythm of the tremors. It was no longer random. It was structured, patterns forming like sentences. Lirae found him one evening, half-slumped over the console. "You're burning out," she said. He looked up, eyes red. "Listen." The tremors came again, soft, steady, repeating in intervals. "That's a sequence," he said. 3 long pulses, 2 short, over and over. Lirae frowned. "Morse pattern, close enough. Except it's using frequency modulation instead of time spacing. It's speaking in vibration." She leaned over his shoulder. "Can you decode it?" He hesitated. "Not completely, but I think it's saying return to the source." Lirae's expression darkened. "The monolith," he nodded slowly. "It's calling us back." They met Sorek again the next morning. The commander looked worn, eyes shadowed by lack of sleep. "You have something?" he asked. Kael gestured to the holomap. "The tremors are localized now, centered around the monolith chamber. The rest of the crust is stabilizing. Then it's absorbing the energy," Sorek said. "Or storing it," Kael countered. Sorek leaned forward. "You think it's preparing for something?" Kael nodded. "It's gathering power. The last time we interacted with it, it warned us to leave. Now it's calling us back, maybe to finish what it started." Sorek straightened. "Then we're going to find out why." Kael hesitated. "You want to go back down there again? If it's going to destroy us either way, I'd rather understand what we're dying for," Sorek said quietly. Kael looked at him for a long moment, then sighed. "Then we do this right. We go in with shielding, full containment gear, and a remote uplink. No one touches the structure directly." Sorek nodded. "Agreed." The descent this time felt different. The tunnels no longer seemed empty. The air shimmered faintly, as if filled with invisible heat. Their lamps flickered, distorting the light into ghostly trails. At the chamber entrance, the monolith awaited, larger now, or perhaps simply more awake. Its surface rippled with luminous veins, shifting from blue to gold in rhythmic pulses. Kael felt it before he heard it, the low vibration in his chest, like standing beside an ancient engine. Sorek stepped forward cautiously. "Activate the scanner." Temmer, the geologist from before, adjusted his equipment. "Energy levels off the charts. I can't even read the top end. It's like it's bending the instruments." "Try a pulse scan." Temmer triggered the pulse. The beam struck the monolith and vanished. No reflection, no interference, just absorption. Then, without warning, the structure changed. The surface split open, revealing a hollow interior filled with light and movement. The glow projected onto the cavern walls, forming symbols, hundreds of them floating in midair. Kael stepped closer, transfixed. "It's recording something." The symbols twisted, reshaped, and suddenly resolved into images. A world forming from fire, metal continents rising from molten seas. Towers of glass and alloy piercing the clouds, and towering figures, not human, not biological, but radiant, forging cities with gestures, sculpting mountains with light. The images changed again: war, collapse, oceans boiling, skies torn apart. Then darkness. Finally, a single image lingered, a sphere of iron wrapped in storm, its heart glowing faintly blue. Vardo's III. Sorek whispered, "They built this world." Kael nodded slowly and buried themselves within it. The monolith pulsed brighter, and a voice filled the chamber, not sound, but thought echoing in every mind. The cycle returns. The makers fled. The inheritors came. You are not the first, but you may be the last. Sorek stumbled back. What does it want from us? Kael's answer came with the voice. Continuation or cessation, the forge must choose. The monolith's light flared, and a beam shot upward through the rock, piercing miles of crust to the storm above. The cavern shook violently, debris raining down. Fall back, Kael shouted. They fled toward the crawler, the ground buckling beneath their feet. Behind them, the monolith's light expanded, swallowing the chamber in brilliance. As they ascended, Kael looked back through the viewport. The last thing he saw before the tunnel sealed behind them was the world below igniting in blue fire. Back in Bastion's reach, alarms screamed across every deck. The beam from below had reached the surface, splitting the clouds in a column of light visible even through the storm. Kael stood on the observation deck, breathing hard, watching the sky burn. Lirae joined him, her face pale. "What's happening?" Kael's voice was quiet, almost reverent. "The forge is waking up." Above them, the planet answered with thunder that was not made by wind. And somewhere deep below, the architects of the Iron Path stirred once more. When the beam first reached the sky, every instrument in Bastion's reach went mad. Readouts spun, alarms screamed, and the magnetic field collapsed in on itself. The storm that had shrouded Vardo's III for decades broke apart like torn cloth, revealing the blackness of space beyond. For the first time in years, the inhabitants of Bastion's reach saw the stars. They watched from the dome's upper deck, silent, awed, terrified. The beam of light rising from the planet's heart remained constant, as straight and unwavering as a tower of glass. The clouds around it churned in concentric spirals, forming a perfect eye of calm amid the chaos. Kael stood at the viewport, his reflection pale in the glass. "It's stable," he said quietly. "Whatever it's doing, it's holding." Lirae joined him. "That's not comforting." "No," he agreed, "but it's something." The door behind them opened, and Sorek entered, trailed by two officers. His uniform was torn, his face streaked with soot. "The energy pulse knocked out half the relays," he said. "Life support S running on backups. We've got a window before the next surge." Kael turned toward him. "Did you see what it did?" Sorek nodded grimly. "It reached orbit." "What?" The orbital sensors recorded a ripple through the upper atmosphere like a shockwave, but not physical, more like a transmission. Kael frowned. "A signal? That's our assumption," Sorek said. "We just don't know who it was meant for." Lirae's hands tightened on the railing, or what it was meant to awaken. By the second day, the storms were gone entirely. The air above Bastion's reach was eerily still. The planet's magnetosphere was realigning itself, stabilizing around the beam like iron drawn to a magnet. But stability came with a cost. Reports began pouring in from the outer sectors: heat spikes, strange electromagnetic anomalies, metallic growths spreading along the tunnels. Machinery that had never functioned before began to move on its own, responding to some unseen rhythm. Lirae and Kael spent the hours cataloging every change. "This isn't random," Lirae said, pointing at the holographic map. "The growth is symmetrical. It's following the geothermal conduits, using them like veins." Kael studied the pattern. "If that's true, it's converting the station's infrastructure into something else." "Into what?" He hesitated. "A nervous system." Commander Sorek called an emergency meeting. Every officer still able to walk attended, though exhaustion hung heavy in the air. The hall was lit only by emergency lamps, giving the scene a cavernous, half-ritual gloom. Kael presented the data. The projections showed a slow but unstoppable transformation creeping outward from the monolith's chamber. The alien material was rewriting human metal at the molecular level, turning it into the same unknown alloy that composed the ancient tunnels. "In 72 hours, Kael said, the process will reach the upper dome. After that, we lose control of every system tied to the grid." Counselor Mayan leaned forward. "And if we cut power to the grid?" Kael shook his head. "We've tried. It reroutes through the geothermal siphons. Every time we isolate a circuit, it rebuilds the connection faster than we can sever it." "So it's adapting," Sorek murmured. Kael nodded. "Learning. The silence that followed was heavy with fear. Finally, Sorek said, "Then we have one option left. We evacuate." Lirae looked up sharply. "To where? The storms are gone, but the orbiters were destroyed months ago. We still have the long-range shuttle in Hangar 2, Sorek said. "It was meant for interplanetary travel. We can reach the outer belt, maybe link up with a trader convoy, and leave the station to whatever this is," Kael asked. Sorek's voice hardened. "You said it yourself. It's rewriting everything it touches. We can't stop it." Kael stared at the hologram of the planet. "No, but maybe we can understand it before we run." The next 12 hours blurred into a frenzy of movement. Crews loaded supplies, sealed data archives, and dismantled the remaining defense turrets for transport. Every moment, the creeping blue light drew closer, shimmering through the station's corridors like veins of living fire. Kael refused to board the shuttle. "You've lost your mind," Lirae said, as she caught him in the hangar bay, his toolkit slung across his shoulder. "I'm going back down," he said. "No, you're not." She blocked his path. "We barely survived the last time." He met her eyes. The beam wasn't just a weapon or a signal. It changed the planet's atmosphere. If it can do that, it might be able to fix the geothermal core or destroy it completely. If we leave without knowing which, we could doom anyone who ever sets foot here again. Lirae grabbed his arm. "Kael, it's not your responsibility." He smiled faintly. "That's exactly why it is." Sorek approached from across the bay, overhearing the exchange. "You're wasting time. We leave in 1 hour." Kael turned to him. "You need someone to make sure the beam doesn't follow you into orbit." Sorek hesitated. "You think it will? I think it's not done yet. It's calling to something, and if we run, we might lead that something straight to us." For a long moment, Sorek said nothing. Then he nodded once. "You've got 3 hours. After that, we launch." Lirae glared at both of them. "You're insane." Kael placed a hand on her shoulder. "Probably, but that's how humanity got this far." He descended alone. The crawler rattled through the shaft, lights flickering as the walls pulsed with blue and gold. The further he went, the more alien the tunnels became, smooth, seamless, glowing with internal light. The air was thick, almost liquid, resonating with the same deep hum he had heard before. When he reached the chamber, he stopped. The monolith was gone. In its place stood a vast lattice of light and metal, suspended in midair, a geometric web stretching across the entire cavern. Energy arced between its nodes like lightning frozen in glass. Kael stepped forward cautiously. "What are you?" he whispered. The lattice pulsed. A voice filled his mind, the same cold, layered tone he remembered. "We are the Forge, the memory of creation, the architects of iron and flame." Kael swallowed hard. "Why did you wake up now?" The inheritors disturbed the balance. "You drew breath where there should have been silence." "Silence," he said. "This planet is alive. You made it that way. Alive is not the same as awake." He took another step forward. "Then what are you? Machines? Gods? We are what comes before such words. We shaped the path and the path shaped you." Kael frowned. "You created humanity, not directly. Your kind rose from the dust left behind when our fires died. You are the echo of our design, bound by our remnants." He stared at the lattice, realization dawning. "That's why the structures recognize us. The patterns, the resonance, it's coded into our biology. The inheritance was not meant to last. The forge decays, and with it, the memory of what we were. But now the pattern stirs once more. The iron path must choose, renewal or oblivion." The light intensified until Kael had to shield his eyes. "What do you want me to do?" "Decide." The beam above flickered. For a brief moment, Kael saw images, mountains turning to glass, cities burning, stars collapsing into themselves. Then, in the middle of it all, a figure of light reaching toward him. "We built to endure. You build to defy." The Forge remembers both. The vision faded. Kael stood alone in the darkened cavern, heart pounding. He understood at last. The Forge wasn't just waking up, it was rebooting itself. And it was using the geothermal network, the human machinery, even the atmosphere as components in that process. If left unchecked, it would rebuild the entire planet in its own image, erasing everything human in the process. Kael raced back toward the crawler. As he reached the tunnel mouth, his comm crackled to life. "Kael, it's Lirae. Are you reading this?" He exhaled in relief. "I'm here. What's happening up there?" "The beam's destabilizing. Sorek trying to hold the launch until you return, but the station's losing structural integrity. The it's spreading faster." "I know what it's doing," Kael said. "It's rewriting the planet. We have to stop it before it finishes the sequence." "How?" "I need to overload the geothermal core, trigger a chain reaction before it completes its conversion." There was a pause. "That'll destroy everything." "Yes," Kael said, "including whatever's left of them." Static filled the line for a moment, then Lirae's voice came softly. "You don't have to do this alone." He smiled faintly. "You said that before, and you didn't listen before either." She met him halfway down the shaft, carrying a pack of detonation cells. Kael frowned as she climbed into the crawler beside him. "You were supposed to be on the shuttle. I told Sorek I wasn't leaving until I got you back." He laughed under his breath. "You really are terrible at following orders." She shrugged. "You needed someone to make sure you didn't get yourself killed." Together, they descended once more into the core chamber. The lattice above them pulsed faster now, the hum almost deafening. The ground vibrated like a drumbeat. Kael placed the first detonation cell along the geothermal vent, setting the timer manually. "We'll overload the containment seals in sequence. That should destabilize the lattice's energy feedback. And then," he gave a grim smile, "then we run." They worked in silence for several minutes, the air shimmering with heat and energy. When the last charge was placed, Kael stood and faced the glowing web. "Forgive me," he whispered, though he wasn't sure to whom. The voice returned, echoing through the chamber. "Destruction is your inheritance, so be it." The lattice brightened, blinding in its brilliance. Kael slammed his hand on the detonator. The world exploded. For a moment, there was nothing but white. Then heat, pressure, and sound slammed into them like a collapsing sun. The floor cracked open, molten light pouring through the fissures. The entire cavern convulsed, and the lattice shattered into shards of radiance that dissolved into dust. Kael grabbed Lirae's hand and dragged her toward the crawler as debris rained from above. They barely made it inside before the tunnel behind them collapsed. The crawler roared upward through the shaft, pursued by a wave of light and fire. "Faster," Lirae shouted. Kael pushed the throttle to its limit. The vehicle shot through the last stretch of tunnel, bursting into the upper hangar just as the ground beneath them gave way. They tumbled out into the open air, into the blinding dawn. Above them, the beam faltered, flickered, and then died. The sky darkened again, the stars vanishing behind gathering clouds. Bastion's reach shook one final time, then fell silent. Kael lay on the scorched metal floor, gasping, the taste of ash in his mouth. Lirae lay beside him, her hand gripping his. "It's over," she whispered. He looked up at the sky. "No," he said softly, "it's beginning again." Far above the planet, in the cold black of space, something stirred in response to the vanished signal. A shape moved against the stars, vast, ancient, and alive. Its surface glowed faintly blue, echoing the rhythm of a long-forgotten forge. And deep within its hollow heart, a voice whispered, "The inheritors have chosen. The path endures." For several hours after the explosion, the world lay still. The air above Bastion's reach shimmered with residual heat, the smell of scorched iron drifting through the corridors. The once glowing tunnels were now dark and fractured, and the blue luminescence that had infected the walls was fading into dull gray metal. Kael awoke in the med bay, his body aching from burns and impact trauma. The lights above flickered weakly. For a moment he didn't know where he was or whether he was still alive. Then he heard Lirae's voice beside him. "You're lucky, half the station collapsed. If Sorek hadn't pulled you out, you'd be buried in molten rock right now." He turned his head slowly. She sat in a chair beside his bed, her arm bandaged, her hair streaked with soot. "Did it work?" he croaked. She hesitated. "Mostly." Kael tried to sit up, wincing. "Define mostly." "The beam is gone. The lattice is destroyed. The geothermal core's stabilizing, but the planet isn't the same. The surface storms have stopped, but there's a new field signature surrounding the planet, something we've never seen before." Kael exhaled. It survived, didn't it? Lirae's gaze softened. Maybe part of it, maybe just its echo. He closed his eyes. That's enough to worry me. When Kael was strong enough to walk, he found Sorek in the command dome. The structure had been half collapsed, the upper glass panels shattered, exposing the grey horizon beyond. Sorek stood at the central console, watching a looping display of the planet's new readings. You shouldn't be out of bed, Sorek said without turning. I'll rest when we're not sitting on top of a half-awake alien machine. Sorek allowed himself a dry laugh. That's fair. Kael joined him at the console. The map displayed a faint sphere of energy encompassing the planet, pale and transparent, like a ghostly shield. What's holding it? Kael asked. No idea, Sorek admitted. It's not electromagnetic, not plasma, it's something else entirely. But whatever it is, it's keeping the atmosphere stable. The radiation levels dropped by 40%, so the planet's healing seems that way or adapting. Kael studied the data silently for a while. We need to figure out what that field is doing. If it's protective, fine, but if it's containment, then we're the ones trapped inside, Sorek finished. They both stared at the swirling field for a long time. 2 days later, the shuttle was ready. The surviving crew gathered in the hangar, less than half their original number. The rest were dead or missing, swallowed by the collapse. The air carried the scent of burnt fuel and ozone. Sorek addressed them briefly. We don't know if what's out there is safe, but we can't stay here forever. If we find a way past the field, we head for the outer belt and send for rescue. If we can't, then we build something new. The crew nodded, silent but resolute. Kael and Lirae stood near the edge of the bay, watching the shuttle pre-flight diagnostics. You're still not coming, she said quietly. He shook his head. Someone has to monitor the geothermal grid. If the core destabilizes again, you'll all be vapor before you clear orbit. Lirae folded her arms. You always pick the heroic option. Heroic would be leaving, he said softly. This is guilt. She reached out and squeezed his hand. Then at least let me share it. He smiled faintly. Not this time. The engines roared to life. The shuttle lifted from the hangar in a plume of flame, ascending through the still air toward the edge of the new atmospheric field. Kael watched from the observation deck as the vessel grew smaller until it was just a silver spark against the grey sky. Then, as it reached the upper limit, something unexpected happened. The spark stopped. The field rippled, visible now as a faint distortion, like oil on water, and the shuttle bounced back, its trajectory reversing slightly before stabilizing. The crew tried again, engines blazing at full thrust, but the barrier held. Kael's stomach turned. Containment, he whispered. He activated the comm. Sorek, pull back. You're not getting through. Static crackled before Sorek's voice came through. We see it, the field's reflective, some kind of repulsion effect. We are trapped. Lirae's voice followed, tense but calm. Kael, readings are spiking around the contact point. The field's reacting to the engines. Shut them down, Kael ordered. Now, the engines cut off, and the shuttle drifted in silence. Kael watched helplessly as the distortion faded, and the vessel stabilized a few kilometers below the barrier. We're coming back down, Sorek said after a pause. We'll figure this out together. Kael exhaled slowly. Copy that. He turned away from the viewport, his thoughts racing. The forge had chosen to seal itself, and them with it. In the following days, Bastion's reach became a shadow of its former self. Power was rationed, food stores dwindled, and morale sank to near zero. Yet amid the despair, there was also strange peace. Without the storm above or the tremors below, the world was quiet. The air outside was breathable for the first time in living memory. Kael stood on the surface one evening, gazing across the barren plains. The sun was setting, an actual sunset, not just the dull red blur filtered through dust. Lirae joined him, carrying a small handheld scanner. Temperatures steady, she said. Radiation levels minimal. It's like the planet's rewriting its own rules. Or remembering the old ones, Kael murmured. She smiled faintly. You always did talk like a philosopher when you're scared. He glanced at her. And you always talk like a scientist when you're trying not to hope. She laughed softly. Maybe we both need new habits. They stood in silence for a while, watching the horizon. Then faintly they saw it, the blue light returning, but this time not from below. It shimmered faintly across the field above them, moving in slow arcs like constellations forming new shapes. Lirae lifted the scanner. It's shifting, responding to something external. Kael frowned. External, there's nothing out there. Then he stopped. A low vibration rolled through the air, deep and rhythmic, like the pulse of a distant engine. The sky shimmered again, and for an instant, a vast shape passed behind the field, silhouette only, immense and alien. Lirae whispered, "Kael, tell me I didn't see that." "You saw it," he said quietly. "They're here." The next day, every sensor in the dome came alive. The barrier field was resonating with external signals, frequencies so precise they could only be deliberate communication. Sorek paced the command deck, tension etched into every movement. "We're being scanned," he said. "They're mapping the surface." Kael stood beside Lirae at the analysis console. "Not just the surface," she said. "They're mapping life signatures." Sorek looked at them. "You think they're searching for us?" Kael hesitated. "Not us specifically, maybe for the forge itself, or for what's left of it." The comm crackled again. This time it wasn't human static. It was structured, tones rising and falling like language. Lirae turned pale. "It's the same frequency pattern as the monolith." Kael nodded slowly. "The signal we triggered reached them. Whatever built the forge, they've come to see what woke it." Sorek slammed his hand on the console. "Can we respond?" "Not safely," Lirae said. "Anything we transmit could act as a beacon. We have no idea what they'll do if they know we're here." Sorek clenched his jaw. "We can't hide forever." Kael's mind was racing. "Maybe we don't need to. The forge left us a choice. If the field is containment, there must be a control node, something left behind to maintain the barrier." Lirae understood immediately. "And if we find it, we can shut it down." Sorek nodded. "Then do it, whatever it takes." They began the search the next morning, combing through the remains of the lower tunnels. The deeper they went, the more alien the metal became again, smooth, almost organic, humming faintly when touched. Hours passed before Lirae's scanner picked up a harmonic resonance matching the field's frequency. "Here," she said, kneeling beside a fissure in the rock. "It's beneath us." Kael pried open the metal plates, revealing a narrow descent shaft. The air that rose from it was cold and sharp, carrying the faint scent of ozone. "After you," Lirae said with a nervous smile. Kael took a breath and climbed down. At the bottom, they found a chamber unlike the others, a perfect sphere, its walls covered in slow-moving lights. At its center floated a crystalline construct, pulsing faintly with energy. "The control node," Kael whispered. Lirae moved closer, scanning it. "It's stable. The field's harmonics originate here." Kael reached out a hand but stopped short of touching it. "If I shut it down, the barrier might collapse entirely. That could mean freedom or annihilation." Lirae met his eyes. "You've never been one to choose safety." He smiled faintly. "No, I suppose I haven't." He placed his hand on the crystal. Instantly, light engulfed the chamber. His mind filled with images, galaxies forming, stars being forged, machines of impossible scale drifting through nebulae. Voices layered over one another, not words but concepts, creation, inheritance, recurrence. He saw humanity's reflection among those shapes, small, fragile, burning fiercely in defiance. Then a final thought whispered through the light. The forge endures because the inheritors dream. Kael's eyes snapped open. The crystal dimmed, then shattered. Above them, the barrier field dissolved like mist. From the surface, the stars shone again. The immense silhouette beyond the atmosphere shimmered, then moved closer, drifting until it hung above the horizon like a second moon. For a moment, Kael thought it would attack. Instead, beams of golden light descended, soft, scanning, almost gentle. Lirae stood beside him, her face bathed in the glow. "They're not here to destroy us." Kael nodded slowly. "No, they're watching. Waiting to see what we become." Sorek's voice came over the comm. "The field's gone, we are free to launch." Kael looked up at the hovering colossus. "Not yet, there's still more to learn." That night, under a sky full of unfamiliar stars, Kael sat on the edge of the old observation deck. The blue glow was gone, replaced by the faint hum of life returning to the planet. Lirae joined him quietly. "So what now?" he smiled. "Now we rebuild, we make this place ours, and maybe one day when they come again we'll have something worth showing them." She leaned against him. "You really think they'll come back?" He looked to the stars. They never left. Far above, the vast shape shimmered once, then drifted into the darkness, leaving behind only the faintest echo of light. The iron path remained, silent, waiting, alive, and humanity endured. The first dawn over Bastion's reach came with a strange kind of quiet, not the absence of sound, but a breathing calm, as if the planet itself had paused to remember what stillness was. The surviving crew gathered on the main ridge overlooking the valley. The sky was clear for the first time in years, a pale amber streak stretching from horizon to horizon. The air tasted of minerals and rain, untouched by smoke or metal. Kael stood at the edge of the precipice, arms crossed, surveying the landscape. Below him, the ruins of the old excavation sites glowed faintly with the same residual energy that had once threatened to consume the world. Yet now it pulsed slowly, less violent, almost rhythmic, as if the forge had been tamed. Lirae approached, carrying a tablet still linked to the orbital sensors. "The barrier's gone for good. Readings are normal, atmosphere's steady. We can finally leave." Kael didn't look away from the valley. "And yet you sound disappointed." Lirae laughed softly. "I'm a scientist. I like anomalies." "Then you should love this place," Kael said. "It's full of them." He crouched down, picking up a shard of the alien alloy. It shimmered faintly under the sunlight, bending the reflection around its edges. "It's still alive in a way," he murmured. "Whatever energy powered it didn't just vanish." "Alive isn't the word I'd use," Lirae replied. "Responsive, maybe, dormant." Kael slipped the shard into his pack. "Let's hope it stays that way." The next weeks were spent rebuilding. The forge's core chambers had collapsed entirely, but parts of the infrastructure were salvageable. Energy conduits still pulsed faintly beneath the surface, their power renewable and self-sustaining. Sorek oversaw the construction of the new settlement, simple shelters reinforced with alien metal, laid out in neat rows along the ridge. The crew moved with purpose, perhaps because there was no other choice. Survival required rhythm, and rhythm required work. At night, they would gather by the old geothermal vents, their warmth serving as both heat and reminder of what had nearly killed them. One evening, Sorek approached Kael as he studied the newly built communications array. "You've been staring at that readout for hours," Sorek said, setting down a crate of power cells. Kael rubbed his eyes. "It's still out there." "The ship," he nodded. "It hasn't moved since the day the barrier fell. It's just sitting in high orbit, watching." Sorek grunted. "Maybe they're deciding what to do with us, or waiting for something." Sorek frowned. "Like what?" Kael turned toward the horizon. "A sign that we've learned something from what we awakened." Sorek scoffed. "You really think they care?" Kael smiled faintly. "They built the forge to test inheritors. Maybe this was the test, to see if we'd burn ourselves with it or build something new." Sorek crossed his arms. "Then they must be bored out there, because right now all we're building are sleeping quarters and food processors." Kael chuckled. "Even gods need patience." On the 29th day after the barrier's collapse, the signal came. It began as a faint tremor in the comm array, no sound, no message, just a rhythmic pulse, identical to the one Kael had felt when he touched the control node weeks before. The pattern was unmistakable. Lirae called him to the dome. "It's directed," she said, pointing to the display. "The source is that vessel in orbit. The pulse is being modulated into a language matrix." Kael leaned over her shoulder. "Can you decode it?" "I can try. It's not just linguistic, it's conceptual. They're transmitting ideas, not words." The waveform on the display shifted, folding into a fractal-like sequence of geometric forms. Lirae frowned. "That's not a message, it's a blueprint." "For what?" She hesitated. "Something buried. I think they're showing us how to find it." Kael stared at the projection. The pattern resembled the same crystalline network that once covered the forge walls, only this time it spiraled outward from a single point beneath the northern valley. Sorek joined them, reading the display with a soldier's impatience. "You think they want us to dig again, after what happened?" Kael shook his head. "Not dig, understand. Whatever they left behind, it's not a weapon, it's a seed." Sorek scowled. "Seeds grow, weapons destroy. You think there's a difference?" "There is when the universe's architects are watching to see which one you choose to make," Kael said. Lirae smiled faintly. "You're starting to sound like them." Kael's eyes remained fixed on the display. "Maybe that's the point." The excavation began the next day. It wasn't like before, no heavy drills, no reactor-powered mining units. They worked slowly, by hand and by light tools, following the resonance lines left by the pulse. The ground here was softer, more pliant, as though it wanted to be opened. After 3 days, they found it, a spherical chamber, smaller than the original forge core, but made of the same alloy. Inside, instead of machinery, there was a single pedestal, and atop it, a crystalline sphere no larger than a human heart. It glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with the signal from orbit. Lirae knelt beside it, breathless. "This is it, whatever they wanted us to find." Kael reached out, stopping just short of contact. "Last time I touched one of these, the world nearly ended." Sorek folded his arms. "And this time," Kael smiled grimly, "let's find out." He placed his palm on the sphere. Light erupted again, but not violently. Instead, the light expanded outward in slow waves, filling the chamber with warmth. Kael's vision blurred, and for a moment he saw through the eyes of something vast, an intelligence that spanned galaxies, watching civilizations rise and fall like tides. It did not speak. It showed. He saw human ships in distant systems, spreading far beyond their cradle world. He saw them wielding knowledge and fire, creating and destroying in equal measure. And through it all, the same pulse, the rhythm of persistence, beat within them. When the vision faded, Kael was on his knees, gasping. Lirae touched his shoulder. "What did you see?" He looked up at her, eyes wide. "The forge wasn't built to test us. It was built to remember us. Every world they found, they left a piece of themselves behind and waited to see if someone would wake it." Sorek frowned. "So we've just told them we're awake." Kael nodded slowly. "Yes, and now they know we're ready." That night, the alien ship moved for the first time. From the ridge, they watched as it shifted position, a slow, deliberate motion that placed it directly above the excavation site. Then, with a low hum, it began to emit a beam, not destructive, but radiant, a column of soft golden light that enveloped the settlement. Lirae shielded her eyes. "What's it doing?" Kael's voice was calm. "It's giving us something." When the light faded, the ship was gone. In its place, scattered across the settlement, lay hundreds of small metallic fragments, identical in composition to the forge alloy, but smooth, clean, and inert. Each one bore a different pattern etched into its surface, resembling constellations. Lirae picked one up, examining it. "They're keys," she said softly, "or data nodes, a gift." Sorek turned the piece over in his hands. "And if it's a weapon," Kael smiled faintly, "then they've left us to decide what to do with it." Weeks passed. The settlement grew stronger, powered by the energy cells within the alien fragments. They learned to shape the metal, to harness its resonance, to fuse it with human engineering. Machines once considered prototypes now ran on almost limitless power. But Kael noticed something else. The more they built, the more the planet changed. Vegetation began to grow across the valley, the air thickened with moisture, the soil regained color. "The forge wasn't just a weapon or a memory," Lirae said one evening, watching the green spread across the hills. "It's a catalyst, it heals." Kael nodded. "Maybe that's what they wanted us to see. That creation is its own inheritance." Sorek joined them, holding one of the fragments. "You really think they're gone for good?" Kael looked toward the night sky, where the stars burned brighter than they ever had. "No," he said quietly, "they'll be back, not to test us, but to see what we've made of their gift." He paused, feeling the hum of the living world beneath his boots. "Next time we won't be the students," he said. "We'll be the inheritors." The wind carried his words across the ridge, where the new city lights flickered like constellations reborn. Above them, the stars seemed to pulse in rhythm, once, twice, and then still. The forge slept, and humanity began again. The city that grew from the bones of Bastion's reach was unlike anything humanity had ever built. Its towers were neither steel nor stone, but alloy, grown from the alien fragments gifted from the sky. Each structure pulsed faintly with an inner light, alive with energy drawn from the veins of the planet itself. Roads shimmered in the dusk, not from reflected sunlight, but from bioluminescent particles woven into their surface. Power no longer came from fuel or fission, but from resonance, the hum of the world's reawakened forge singing through every conduit. Kael stood on the highest balcony of the command spire, watching the horizon. Beyond the city's glow, the once barren plains were blooming with green. Forests were returning, rivers carving new paths through the softened earth. It had been 3 years since the skyship vanished, and still its absence felt deliberate. "They're waiting," he said softly. Lirae joined him, her hair catching the warm light from the core below. "Waiting for what?" "For proof that we deserved their gift." Lirae rested her arms on the rail beside him. "We've built homes, farms, research centers. We've learned to stabilize the lattice." "Isn't that proof enough?" Kael's gaze remained fixed on the distant hills. "Maybe not for them, maybe not yet for us either." He turned away, heading toward the lift. "The council's waiting. They found something new." In the central chamber, the council gathered, scientists, engineers, and former soldiers who had become the architects of this new world. Sorek sat at the head of the table, older now, his once rough demeanor tempered by purpose. He motioned for Kael and Lirae to sit. "We found another signal, this time not from orbit." Lirae frowned. "From the planet," Sorek nodded, "deep within the northern range, beneath one of the new growth zones." The readings matched the original forge signature, but this one's older, buried kilometers below the surface. Kael studied the projection on the hollow table. The resonance pattern was unmistakable. "A second forge," he said. Lirae leaned forward. "If there's another, it means this planet was built on layers. They didn't just construct one experiment, they built a chain of them." Sorek grunted. "And we woke the first link." Kael nodded. "Which means the next one might be different." The room fell silent for a moment before Sorek spoke again. "We can't ignore it. If there's something down there, we need to know what it is before it wakes itself." Lirae looked at Kael. "You're thinking what I'm thinking." He gave a grim smile. "That it's not just a forge, it's a beacon." The expedition left at dawn. The northern range was rougher than the valley plains, jagged cliffs of black glass and strange crystalline growths jutting from the ground like frozen waves. The air shimmered faintly, distorting light, as if the atmosphere itself resisted intrusion. Kael led the team on foot, with Lirae beside him and a convoy of carriers trailing behind. As they approached the signal source, the terrain began to shift subtly. The ground beneath them resonated faintly with each step, sending ripples through the crystalline shards. Lirae crouched, scanning the soil. "The lattice extends all the way up here. The forge's reach isn't local, it's planetary." Kael's jaw tightened. "Then whatever's buried here may not just be another forge. It could be the core of the entire network." They descended through a natural fissure that split one of the cliffs. The walls pulsed with the same dull light they'd seen before, alive, aware. At the base of the fissure lay a vast chamber, open to the subterranean dark. Its walls were lined with dormant machinery, columns of alien alloy etched with flowing sigils. At the center, half buried in rock, stood a colossal figure. It was humanoid, but not human, tall and slender, its body composed of interlocking metal plates that seemed to have once moved. Its eyes were hollow, its chest cavity open and empty. Lirae's voice trembled. "It's a construct." Kael stepped forward slowly. "No, it's a guardian." Sorek's voice echoed from the rear. "You think it's dead?" Kael shook his head. "No, just waiting." For days they studied the construct. It was ancient beyond reckoning, older than the surface forge, older perhaps than the civilization that built it. Lirae found data channels embedded within its plating, though most were inert. Only one section of its chest remained active, pulsing faintly when she approached. "It's connected to the planetary network," she said one night, exhaustion in her voice. "A failsafe maybe, or a command relay." Kael watched the glow. If the forge was meant to awaken inheritors, this thing might be the judge. Sorek folded his arms. Judge of what? Of whether we're worthy to take the next step. The room fell silent. The soft hum from the Guardian's chest filled the air like a heartbeat. Then, slowly, the glow intensified. The construct's eyes lit for the first time. Lirae stumbled back. "It's activating." Kael reached for his sidearm out of reflex but hesitated. "No, don't let it speak." The air vibrated with a deep harmonic tone. Light cascaded across the chamber, and from the construct's chest, a projection formed shifting shapes, language beyond words. Then a voice, not mechanical, not human, something in between. "You are the inheritors of the broken forge." Kael stepped forward. "Who built you?" "I was made before your suns were kindled," the voice said. "My makers forged worlds and scattered their children across the stars. Each world was a seed, each seed a test." "And the forge?" Kael asked. "The forge is memory," it replied. "A record of those who rise and fall. It endures as long as there are minds that dream." Lirae's eyes widened. "Then why now? Why reveal yourself?" The construct's head turned slowly toward her. "Because you woke the seed before it was ready. You have altered the rhythm of inheritance." Sorek scowled. "Are you saying we've broken your plan?" "Plans are irrelevant. Adaptation defines survival. You have done what many before you could not. You endured your own awakening." Kael took a breath. "Then what happens now?" The light pulsed again. "Now you choose." "Choose what? Creation or conquest? The path of the inheritor is not given, it is made." The light dimmed. The construct's eyes flickered once, then went dark. "Silence," Lirae whispered. "It left us with a choice." Kael nodded slowly. "And it's watching how we answer." When they returned to the city, Kael called an assembly. Every citizen gathered in the plaza beneath the great spire, the air thick with anticipation. He stood before them, voice carrying through the amplified hum of the city's resonance grid. "We've learned what this world truly is," he began. "It isn't a ruin or a relic, it's a reflection. Everything we build here, everything we choose to be, becomes part of the inheritance we'll leave behind. The ones who made the forge aren't gone. They're watching to see what we'll make of the fire they left us." He looked across the crowd, faces young and old, hardened and hopeful. "Some of you want to leave, to take what we've learned and return to the stars. Some want to stay and keep building. Both paths are right. But we cannot be the species that only learns to destroy what it finds. We must be more." He raised one of the alien fragments, still etched with faint constellations. "This is not a weapon, it's a promise. The forge remembers those who create and forgets those who conquer. Let's make sure we're remembered." The crowd stood in silence, then erupted in applause. Above them, unseen but surely aware, the stars pulsed once more. Years passed. The city grew into a civilization, spanning the valleys and mountain ridges. Human ships, forged from alien alloy and human ingenuity, took to the skies again. They did not flee the planet, they explored, learning to shape the resonance technology without consuming the worlds they touched. Kael grew old, his hair silver, his hands lined with the wear of decades. He often stood alone on the observation balcony where it had all begun, watching the younger generations launch new vessels toward the horizon. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, he saw a shape on the horizon, vast and glimmering, descending slowly from orbit. He smiled. "You took your time." Lirae joined him, her eyes wide. "Is that?" He nodded. "It's them." The same golden vessel that had once vanished now hung above the valley, but this time no beam of light descended. Instead, a series of luminous symbols appeared across the sky, patterns of stars rearranging into a single message. Lirae read it aloud, voice trembling. "The inheritors have remembered." Kael closed his eyes. "Then the forge has fulfilled its purpose." The ship shimmered once, and from it countless smaller lights descended, tiny motes scattering across the world like seeds. Each one embedded itself into the soil, glowing softly, merging with the living earth. The planet pulsed in response. The hum that had once been faint now resonated through every stone, every tree, every heartbeat. Lirae turned to Kael. "What happens now?" he smiled faintly. "Now we become what they always hoped we would." When Kael died, decades later, they buried him beneath the roots of the first tree to grow on the Forge's plains. The people called it the Tree of Memory, for its bark shimmered faintly with the same blue light that had once powered the Forges. Generations came and went. The city became a capital. The planet became a legend. And when future travelers crossed the stars, they spoke of the world that was once called Bastion's Reach, where humanity stopped being the conqueror and became the creator. They called it the Iron Path, the road from fire to light. And across the far reaches of space, the Forges stirred again, one by one, as if awakening to the song of their newest inheritors. Humanity's age of creation had begun.